Hey everyone, Harry here to talk about Donald Trump's support for accused sexual assailants Andrew Cuomo, the former governor of New York, and current mayor Eric Adams. Those two men were sued, as was Trump before them, under this New York law passed a couple years ago that permitted victims of or alleged victims of sexual assault this 1 year period to bring a lawsuit against their accused assailants, no matter how long ago it was, right? So this is when it was passed, Ege Carrol, who to date had sued Trump only for defamation, based on his saying, she's lying and not my type and those things, was able to sue for the underlying incident, which happened in 1991. Now, that's a really unusual state of affairs in the law, which favors finality and repose and the policy that people at a certain point, even who have done bad, can get on with their lives and know that the law is either coming at them or it isn't. So here we go, a law from 32 years before. So Trump, has always, as he did again, inveigh against Ege Carrol. Here's what Trump had to say. I got sued decades later by a woman, all in caps. I had no idea who she was. It was a made-up fairy tale that was brought and funded by political operatives for purpose of election interference. Okay, that's the Ege Carrol case, and it's the assault he's already been found to have committed and a defamation, and now there's a second defamation trial, and that's going forward in about 6 weeks. And it's already been found that he's guilty, and that he's liable for the defamation, and the question will be damages. All right, so that's the prelude to his statement yesterday, because the New York law expired last week, and so that year period that victims had to bring dormant lawsuits they had to do it or not by last week, and both Andrew Cuomo and Mayor Adams were sued under this law by people who alleged some time ago that they were victims of assaults by them. And of course, Cuomo basically had to leave office because of his sexual misconduct. And Eric Adams is in a world of trouble now, having nothing to do with the assault charges, but he's under investigation by the FBI, having to do with with trying to get a building and getting a building built that Turkey wanted. This was before he was mayor. Anyway, so for both of them, it's a very it's got this added freight to what's already a heavy legal load that they're carrying. And so sure enough, Donald Trump comes out and expresses his support for both of them. He on Truth Social today says he hopes that Adams, Cuomo, and all of the others that got sued based on this ridiculous law where someone can be sued decades later and with no proof will fight it on being totally unfair and, back to the all caps, unconstitutional. So he is, solidarity with other accused sexual predators, Cuomo and Adams, who, nothing's been proven as to them, unlike to Trump, where a jury has found, in fact, his improper conduct. Remember, there's this little wrinkle about did he rape Ege Carrol or not, but he was found guilty of sexual assault. Cuomo and Adams not. So leaving being agnostic about that, he is saying that anyone who's accused on this law should be exonerated because it's such a terrible unconstitutional law. Okay, now unfortunately for that position, the law has been found to be constitutional, and indeed in his very case. So Carroll versus Trump earlier this year upheld the constitutionality of the Adult Survivors Act. The reasoning sort of modeled on an act that had been upheld that permitted child victims of assault. It's also a controversial law. I mean, in general, being able to go back 30 years and bring a lawsuit is not the normal way of the U.S. legal system. It was upheld for child victims, and a big part of that reasoning is they often suffer trauma and can have memories sort of suppressed and then come to light. A similar argument, New York, which passed this law, made, which is basically the so-called culture of silence that persisted for many years, that made women reticent, if not completely unwilling to come forward with charges of sexual assault, especially against powerful men. And so that was the justification. And based on that justification, the court upheld it. This so-called 1-year revival period. The challenge, it's a New York law, was under the New York Due Process Clause. I don't think there's been litigation, especially under the federal, or particularly under the federal Due Process Clause. It would have to be both, but the New York Due Process Clause, basically is a stand-in, and under that test, it's whether a revival statute is a reasonable measure to address an injustice, which is pretty loosey-goosey standard, but the injustice here would be the culture of silence, and it's a reasonable measure to address it. And so this has been upheld. It hasn't gone all the way up. The case was earlier this year, and you can imagine higher court and even potentially a federal U.S. Supreme Court. It would have to be up through a state system, and then it would go on the federal question to the U.S. Supreme Court. So you can imagine a court's saying otherwise, but that's the state of play. So at least his capital letters unconstitutional is Trumpian wishful thinking. Okay, so there you have it. As the law was designed, especially to get at powerful assailants and the previous, but I would say abated culture of silence. The mayor of New York, the former governor of New York, were sued by victims who say they were assaulted by them. And Donald Trump has come out and, rooted for old or, dormant claims of sexual assailants everywhere in New York, and that, the whole law that has been applied against him, and is part of the Ege Carrol case that still isn't finished and where it's looking pretty rough for him. The whole thing is unconstitutional, and that's his tirade of the day, and his hanging in there with other accused sexual assailants. That's Trump's big filibuster for the day. So I don't know whether Adams and Cuomo would welcome his vehement capitalized support, but they haven't. In any event, I don't think it will help them very much, and these cases probably will proceed. By the way, that doesn't, that you can reopen the cases they're still hard to prove. Cases that are long since dormant can be very difficult to prove. So all this does is give victims a chance to make their claims. But anyway, I think that's going to happen now, and Trump's protests are in vain, and B, illuminating of his basic grievance against New York for leaving him open to liability for long ago past sexual assaults, in this case by Ege Carrol. So that's the state of play. We'll see how those cases develop, and we'll also watch the January trial for defamation for Ege Carrol, which will revisit this 1991 assault. Talk to you later. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this video and other Talking Feds content, please take a second to like and subscribe. Talk to you later.